The silent exodus, the Galactic Council chamber hummed with the usual cacophony of 1,000 voices. Representatives from across the spiral arms debated trade sanctions, territorial disputes, and the mundane mechanics of keeping civilization glued together. Ambassador Kelrick of the Then Collective shuffled his data tablets, half listening to a Vrexian delegate drone on about mineral rights. Then someone noticed the empty seats, 17 chairs, arranged in a semicircle near the eastern viewport, sat vacant. Their polished surfaces gleamed under the chamber's artificial light, untouched. No nameplates, no delegation markers, just absence. Where are the humans? Someone asked. The question rippled through the chamber like a stone dropped in still water. Kelrick frowned, searching his memory. When had he last seen Ambassador Chen or Dr. Reeves? The realization hit him like a physical blow. It had been weeks, maybe months. The Council's AI system was queried. The response came back in clinical, emotionless text. Human delegations recalled. Earth embassy closed. All diplomatic channels terminated. No explanation. No warning. No farewell. Within hours, the news had spread across every inhabited world. Humanity had withdrawn from galactic society completely. Their embassies stood empty. Their trade ships returned to home ports, their research stations abandoned mid-experiment. Communication arrays pointed toward Earth received only automated messages. This frequency is no longer monitored. At first, the galaxy shrugged. Good riddance, muttered the Kryn high speaker, her crystalline form refracting light in sharp, angry patterns. They were always too emotional, too unpredictable. The Vothari Chancellor issued a formal statement expressing mild disappointment while privately celebrating. Humans had always been troublesome, questioning established protocols, proposing radical reforms, insisting on ethical frameworks that slowed down profitable ventures. Trade continued. Politics continued. The galaxy turned on its axis, and most believed life would simply be easier. But in the quiet corners of 1,000 worlds, people began to notice something wrong. On Station Helios 7, a mining outpost near the Crab Nebula, Foreman Tulek stared at his production reports with growing frustration. Output had dropped 17% in 3 months. Equipment failures had tripled. Morale was in freefall. It's the maintenance schedules, his assistant explained, pulling up old records. The humans designed them. We've been trying to replicate their work, but nothing functions the same way. Tulek scrolled through the files. The human engineer's notes were meticulous, color-coded, filled with small annotations. Check this valve every 40 hours. Not 50. Learned this the hard way. The manufacturer's specs are wrong. Trust the sound instead. If Meyer's on shift, remind him about his bad knee. Have him train someone else for the crawlspace work. It wasn't just technical knowledge. It was care, attention, understanding that machines were maintained by people, not algorithms. They tried following the procedures exactly. It didn't work. Something essential was missing. The intuition, the experience, the human touch that turned maintenance from a checklist into an art form. Across the galaxy, similar stories multiplied. The medical station on Viridian 4 lost its crisis response coordinator, a human doctor named Soroya, who could triage a disaster zone faster than any AI. Her replacement, a highly qualified Then physician, followed every protocol perfectly. But when an epidemic struck the southern continent, hundreds died waiting for the proper procedural approvals that Dr. Soroya would have bypassed without hesitation. The Interspecies Cultural Institute on Proxima collapsed within a year. Its human director, Professor Matsuda, had somehow maintained peace between 63 different civilizations sharing one campus. His replacement lasted 4 months before the Grell delegation attempted to consume the Flaxian art students during a cultural misunderstanding. The Kryn Symphony, once the pride of the Andromeda sector, gave its final performance to a half-empty concert hall. Their human conductor, Maestro Williams, had been the only one who could make 7 species with completely different auditory ranges appreciate the same piece of music. Without her, the orchestra was just noise. Even the little things vanished. The coffee shop on Nexus, Prime closed because no one else could replicate. Maria's recipes. She'd adjusted every beverage for each species' biology and taste preferences, keeping mental notes on thousands of regulars. The youth center on Arcturus Station shut down because Mr. Huang's After-school program couldn't be transferred to someone who viewed childcare as a job rather than a calling ambassador. Kelrick found himself reviewing old footage from council sessions, watching Ambassador Chen navigate impossible negotiations. He'd never appreciated it at the time, the way she'd defuse tensions with a perfectly timed joke, forge compromises where none seemed possible, remember personal details about every delegate's family that somehow made hard conversations easier. She'd made it look effortless. That was the problem. They'd all thought it was easy. 6 months after the Exodus, the Galactic Council commissioned a comprehensive study, Economic and Social Impact of Human Withdrawal. The researchers worked for 4 months compiling data, interviewing thousands, analyzing every sector where humans had been involved. The report was 2,000 pages long, but the executive summary could be reduced to 3 devastating words. Everything is broken, not the infrastructure. That still functioned, mostly. Not the technology. They could reverse engineer what humans had built eventually. What was broken was something more fundamental. The connections, the understanding, the invisible web of empathy and innovation and stubborn hope that humans had woven through galactic civilization. Without anyone noticing, they'd been the translators who didn't just convert words but meaning. The teachers who tailored lessons to how each species actually learned. The engineers who designed systems for the people who'd use them. Not just the specifications they met. The artists who found beauty that transcended biology. The caretakers who saw individuals, not demographics. The galaxy had treated them as optional. Convenient, perhaps, but replaceable. Now they were learning the difference between presence and absence. In her quarters aboard the council station, Ambassador Kelrick's replacement, a Then named Vorim, sat reading through Chen's old files. Personal notes, observations, a detailed guide to council politics written for her successor that would now never arrive. The final entry was dated the day before humanity's departure. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I hope whoever takes this seat understands. This job isn't about policy. It's about people. Remember that, and you'll do fine. Vorim closed the file, his hands trembling slightly. Outside his viewport, the stars burned cold and indifferent, and somewhere among them humanity had disappeared into silence, taking something irreplaceable with them. The galaxy was finally starting to understand what it had lost, but it was far too late to say thank you. The reckoning, the memorial appeared on Earth's moon without warning. It was discovered by a Kryn exploration vessel conducting a routine survey of the Sol system's perimeter, technically a violation of humanity's requested isolation, but no one had expected them to enforce it. The ship's sensors detected a massive structure on Luna's far side, in a crater that had been empty on the last recorded scan. The structure was a wall, 4 kilometers long, 3 stories high, carved from lunar stone, and covering every centimeter of its surface were names, billions of names. The Kryn captain, a veteran officer named Syl, stood in the shadow of that wall for 3 hours, her suit's external speakers playing the only sound in the lunar silence, the soft whisper of her own breathing. Her crew cataloged the names: Catharish, Venik, Talmora, Chiri, species from across the galaxy written in their native scripts. Every single name was someone humanity had saved, the rescued, the healed, the protected, refugees given sanctuary, patients cured of impossible diseases, soldiers pulled from battlefield debris, children plucked from burning ships, worlds saved from famine, species preserved from extinction, disasters averted by human hands. No captions, no explanations. Just names, and at the base of the wall a single line in galactic standard. We remembered you. Did you remember us? Syl transmitted the images back to the council. Within hours they had circulated to every inhabited world. The response was immediate and devastating. A Vrexian mining administrator recognized his own name. He'd been 17 when his colony ship lost life support. A human rescue team had found them drifting 3 days from death. He'd never even learned their names. A Then scientist found her daughter's name, pulled from the rubble after the Nexus station bombing. The human medic had worked for 18 hours straight to save her life, then disappeared before the family could thank him. A Flaxian musician saw his entire band listed. They'd been quarantined during the Red Fever outbreak. Humanity's experimental treatment saved them all. He'd complained at the time about the side effects. The wall became known simply as the ledger, and across the galaxy, people began to understand the true scale of humanity's presence, not through grand gestures or political power, but through 10 billion small acts of kindness they'd never bothered to repay. But the ledger was only the beginning. A Vothari investigative journalist named Kess began digging through archived records, compiling what she called the inventory, a comprehensive database of everything humanity had contributed that the galaxy had taken for granted. The medical advances came first. Humanity had developed treatments for 43 previously incurable diseases. The vaccines, distributed freely, had saved an estimated 20 billion lives across 17 species. The prosthetics technologies, the trauma response protocols, the mental health frameworks, all human innovations, shared without patent restrictions. When the Xerax plague swept through the outer rim, it was a human virologist named Dr. Okoye who'd cracked the genome in 72, sleepless hours, and distributed the cure before governments could argue about profit, margins. The galaxy had never paid for any of it. The treatments were simply there, available, as if they'd appeared from nowhere. Kess's research expanded. She found the disaster response teams, humans who'd dropped everything to rush toward catastrophes while everyone else evacuated. The search and rescue units that pulled survivors from collapsed buildings on worlds they'd never visited. The firefighting crews who'd saved the ancient archives on Thasar 4, suffering third-degree burns to preserve another species' history. She found Teacher Kowalski, who'd spent 30 years in the frontier sectors establishing schools for refugee children from 19 different species. He'd learned all 19 languages, studied all 19 cultures, and designed a curriculum that honored each one while giving them skills to thrive anywhere. She found Engineer Tanaka, who'd built the water purification systems that saved the Marin homeworld from drought. She'd refused payment, saying clean water wasn't something you charged for. She found Commander Reeves, who'd negotiated the Sirius Accords, a peace treaty between 4 warring species that had held strong for 20 years. He'd spent 8 months in a conference room missing his daughter's wedding because he believed peace was worth any personal sacrifice. The list went on, and on, and on. When Kess published the inventory, it ran to 47 volumes. The galactic response was silence, the stunned, shameful silence of civilizations, confronting their own ingratitude because they remembered how they'd treated humanity. Ambassador Kelrick remembered the council sessions where human proposals were dismissed without discussion. Too idealistic, the Kryn had said. Too expensive, the Vothari agreed. Too complicated, everyone concluded. They remembered the trade agreements where humanity offered technology freely and were mocked for their naivety. Profit is how civilizations grow, the economists lectured. Your generosity is a sign of weakness. They remembered the cultural exchanges where human art was dismissed as primitive by critics who'd never bothered to understand it. The literature rejected by publishers who found human emotions excessive. The music ignored by audiences who preferred algorithmic compositions. They remembered the social gatherings where humans were tolerated but never truly welcomed. The jokes made at their expense, sensitive humans, bleeding hearts, do-gooders. The eye rolls when a human suggested helping someone instead of exploiting them. They remembered treating humanity like children, naive, foolish, not understanding how the real galaxy worked, and humanity had absorbed it all without complaint. They'd kept helping, kept building, kept trying to make things better even as the galaxy patronized them for it, until one day, they'd quietly packed up and left. On the council station, a spontaneous gathering formed in the chamber's central plaza. No official call had been issued, but thousands came. Delegates, staffers, civilians. They stood in silence, watching a holographic projection of the ledger's name scrolling endlessly past. Kelrick stood among them, remembering. He remembered Ambassador Chen working through the night to prevent a war between the Krell and the Flaxians, a conflict no one else thought could be stopped. She'd succeeded, saving millions of lives. The council had given her a formal certificate of appreciation. No one had attended the ceremony but him. He remembered Dr. Reeves presenting her research on cross-species psychology, offering it freely to every mental health facility in the galaxy. The response had been polite interest and exactly zero follow-up. She'd looked disappointed but not surprised. He remembered the human engineers fixing the station's life support systems after a critical failure, working for 36 hours straight, while council delegates complained about the inconvenience. When the crisis passed, the engineers were thanked with a brief mention in the official report, misspelling all their names. Humanity had been the galaxy's caretakers, and the galaxy had treated them like servants. The guilt arrived in waves. First came the defensive anger. We didn't ask them to help us. But that rang hollow when confronted with the ledger. Then came the rationalization. We would have figured it out eventually, which felt cruel when children's names scrolled past. Children who would have died without human intervention. Finally came acceptance. They had failed humanity, catastrophically, completely. And now, humanity was gone. The question that haunted every species, every civilization, every individual who'd ever benefited from human kindness was simple and devastating. What do we do now? Some suggested sending delegations to Earth, begging for forgiveness. But humanity had been clear, they wanted no contact. Their borders were closed, their communication channels silent. Approaching uninvited would only prove they still didn't respect human boundaries. Others proposed building monuments, establishing holidays, creating educational programs about humanity's contributions. But that felt hollow, celebrating someone only after they left, honoring them only when they could no longer see it. The Galactic Council commissioned another study, recommendations for moving forward. The research team spent months analyzing the situation, interviewing experts, modeling scenarios. Their final report was 3 sentences long. Humanity didn't ask for monuments or apologies. They asked us to be better. We suggest we start. Slowly, things began to change. The Kryn High Speaker, whose people had been among humanity's harshest critics, announced a radical policy shift. The Kryn Collective would begin offering disaster relief freely, without strings attached. We learned it from humanity, she said in her address. Perhaps we should have learned it sooner. The Then Collective established scholarship programs for species facing hardship. Education provided without expectation of return. They called it the Chen Initiative, though they knew Ambassador Chen would never see it. Station Helio 7's foreman, Tulek began training his maintenance crews differently, not just teaching technical skills, but instilling the care and attention humanity had demonstrated. We're not just fixing machines, he told them. We're taking care of the people who depend on them, medical. Facilities across the galaxy began offering free clinics 1 day per week, the Okoye hours named for the virologist, who'd never charged for her miracles. It was slow. It was imperfect. And it could never repay humanity for what they'd given, but it was something. A start. An acknowledgement that humanity had been right all along. Civilization wasn't about efficiency or profit or power. It was about taking care of each other. The galaxy was finally learning the lesson humanity had tried to teach. The teachers, however, were no longer there to see it. In his quarters, Ambassador Kelrick kept a photo on his desk, the last council session before humanity withdrew. Ambassador Chen stood at the podium mid-speech, her expression passionate and hopeful. She'd been proposing an interspecies healthcare initiative. The council had voted it down. Kelrick looked at that photo every day, and every day he wondered the same thing. Wherever you are, Chen, I hope you know we finally understand. I hope that matters even just a little. But the stars offered no answer, and humanity remained silent, withdrawn into an isolation the galaxy had earned through 10,000 small cruelties disguised as civility. The memorial on Luna stood in darkness, names etched in stone asking a question no one could answer. Did you remember us? Finally, painfully, the galaxy was learning to say yes. The return, the message arrived without fanfare. A simple text transmission on the standard diplomatic frequency that had been silent for 5 years. This is Earth, we're ready to talk. The Galactic Council chamber erupted. Delegates shouted questions at the communication console as if it could answer back. The AI system confirmed. The transmission originated from Sol System, from Earth's diplomatic satellite network, using proper authentication codes. Humanity was breaking its silence, but the message came with conditions. One representative only. No delegation, no entourage, no media. They would come to Earth. Humanity would not travel to meet them. And they had 72 hours to decide who would speak for the galaxy that had failed them. The debate lasted 67 hours. Every major civilization wanted to send their ambassador. The Kryn argued they had the longest diplomatic history. The Vithari claimed their economic influence made them essential. The Then insisted their scientific partnerships with humanity gave them unique standing. It was Ambassador Kelrick who finally ended it. "None of us deserve this honor," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But someone must go. And whoever goes must understand we're not negotiating. We're listening. We're learning. And maybe, if we're very fortunate, we're beginning to make amends." He volunteered himself. No one objected. The journey to Earth took 8 days. Kelrick spent them reviewing everything. The ledger, the inventory, every interaction he'd had with humanity, every mistake he'd witnessed or participated in. He wrote and discarded 17 speeches before finally accepting that no words he'd prepared would matter. He would listen. That's what humanity had always done for them. Perhaps it was time to return the favor. The approach to Sol system was disorienting. The defensive perimeter was new. Automated warning buoys, sensor nets, patrol ships maintaining careful watch. They weren't hostile, just present. Humanity had made it clear. They controlled their own space now. His shuttle was guided to Luna, to a landing pad carved into the crater's rim directly above the ledger. As the airlock cycled, Kelrick felt his pulse hammering in his throat. 3 humans waited outside. The first was elderly, her dark skin weathered by decades, her hair silver white. She wore simple civilian clothes and a gentle smile. "Ambassador Kelrick. I'm Dr. Soroya. We've met before, Viridian 4 during the epidemic," he remembered. She'd saved thousands. The galaxy had barely thanked her. The second was younger, middle-aged with tired eyes and calloused hands. "Engineer Tanaka. I built water systems on Marin." The third was Ambassador Chen. Older now, her hair more gray than black, but her posture still perfect, her eyes still sharp. "Welcome to Earth, Kelrick. It's been a long time." He'd prepared for anger, recrimination, the cold distance of justified resentment. Instead, they offered him tea, real tea, grown in Earth soil, and led him to an observation platform overlooking the ledger. "We need to explain something," Dr. Soroya began, settling into a chair with the careful movement of old joints. "We didn't leave because we were angry." Kelrick blinked. "You weren't?" Ambassador Chen smiled sadly. "We were tired, Kelrick. Bone deep, soul tired. We'd given everything we had and it was never going to be enough. Not because you needed more, but because you didn't understand what you had. Like children," Tanaka added, his voice gentle, "taking their parents for granted, not out of malice, just immaturity. We left," Soroya continued, "because we realized the galaxy needed to grow up, and we couldn't do that for you. You had to do it yourselves." Kelrick felt something crack in his chest. "We failed you." "Yes," Chen agreed. "But you learned. That's why we're talking now." She produced a data tablet displaying reports from across the galaxy, the Kryn's relief programs, the Then's scholarships, the free medical clinics, the maintenance crews trained in human methods. 1,000 small changes, each one a galaxy trying to be better. "It's not enough," Chen said. "Not to repay what we gave. But that's not the point. Then what is?" Kelrick asked. Tanaka leaned forward. "Did these changes happen because you wanted something from us? Or because you decided they were right?" Kelrick thought about Tolek on Station Helio 7, teaching his crews to care for the people behind the machines. About the Kryn High Speaker restructuring her entire civilization's philosophy. About the 1,000 daily acts of kindness he'd witnessed spreading through a galaxy that had once dismissed such things as weakness because they were right, he said quietly. "Then you learned the lesson," Soroya smiled. "That's all we ever wanted." Chen stood, gesturing to the ledger below. "We built this not to guilt you, but to remind you and ourselves why we do what we do. Every name here represents a choice. To help, to care, to see someone suffering and say, 'Not on my watch.' Those choices cost us," Tanaka said. "Time, resources, peace, comfort, sometimes lives. We made them anyway because that's what civilized people do. Not because it profits them. Not because it's easy. Because it's right. And now," Chen finished, "you're making those choices too. That's why we're here. Not to rejoin the galaxy as it was. to help build what it's becoming. Kelrick felt tears, rare for his species, stinging his eyes. What do you need from us? Partnership, Soroya said. Real partnership. Not us giving and you taking. Equals working together. Honesty, Tanaka added. When we offer help, tell us what you actually need, not what you think we want to hear. And respect, Chen concluded. For our boundaries. Our choices. Our right to say no when we need to. We're not the galaxy's caretakers anymore. We're its partners. There's a difference. They spent 3 days in discussion. Not negotiation, conversation. Kelrick learned about humanity's isolation years, the internal debates about whether to ever return, the careful work of healing their own wounds while watching the galaxy struggle without them. He learned that humanity hadn't been idle. They'd expanded their own civilization, pushed further into their local stellar neighborhood, developed new technologies they'd considered sharing, but decided to keep until they knew the galaxy would value them properly. He learned they'd been watching, monitoring, hoping the galaxy would change, but preparing for the possibility it wouldn't. We couldn't save you from yourselves, Chen explained on the third evening, as Earth rotated into sunset beneath them. That was our mistake, thinking we could, thinking we should. Everyone has to learn their own lessons. But you came back, Kelrick said. Why? She looked at him with those sharp, knowing eyes. Because you learned. Because you changed. Because hope is more powerful than resentment, and we'd rather build something together than watch you struggle alone. That's what humanity does, Kelrick. We always come back for people trying to do better. Even after everything? Especially after everything. The return address was broadcast from Luna's surface, carried on every frequency to every corner of the galaxy. Humanity was willing to engage again. Not as before. Not as the galaxy's unpaid helpers, its uncelebrated saviors, its taken-for-granted support system. As equals, as partners, with boundaries, with expectations, with the understanding that relationships require reciprocity. The initial agreements were modest. Scientific exchanges, mutual sharing, not one-sided gifts. Cultural programs, true partnerships, not humanity translating everyone else. Economic cooperation, fair trade, not charity. More importantly, humanity established standards, respect for all species boundaries. Ethical frameworks for technology sharing, support systems for civilizations in crisis. But with the understanding that help was meant to empower, not create dependence. They called it the Accords of Mutual Regard. The name was Chen's suggestion, and it was perfect. Not charity, not obligation. Regard, the recognition that every civilization, every species, every individual deserved to be seen, valued, respected. But humanity also made it clear they would withdraw again if needed. They'd learned they couldn't fix the galaxy. They could only offer what they had and trust others to value it. If that trust was broken again, they would walk away again, permanently next time. The galaxy heard the message. It resonated through every civilization with the weight of a second chance they'd almost lost. Ambassador Kelrick returned to the council chamber 3 weeks after leaving. He delivered his report in person, standing at the same podium where Chen had once proposed initiatives that were voted down, where human voices had been dismissed as naive or impractical or too idealistic. Humanity is offering us a gift, he told the assembled representatives, not resources or technology or their labor. They're offering us their presence, their partnership, on the condition that we treat it as the treasure it is. He paused, looking out at the faces from 1,000 worlds. We failed them once. We took everything they gave and offered nothing but contempt in return. They left and we learned what absence feels like. Now they're giving us a second chance, not because we earned it, but because that's who they are. His voice hardened. We will not fail them again. Not through malice. Not through neglect. Not through the casual cruelty of taking someone for granted. If any civilization, any delegation, any individual cannot commit to treating humanity with the respect they deserve, I suggest you excuse yourselves now, because I will personally ensure you have no contact with them. Silence answered him. Then the Kryn High Speaker stood, her crystalline form chiming softly. I propose, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, that we establish a new council principle. Let it be recorded in our founding documents, taught to every generation, the principle of regard. That we value not just what someone can give us, but who they are. That we respect not just power, but kindness. that we remember that civilization is measured not by what we achieve, but by how we treat each other. The vote was unanimous. Years passed. The relationship between humanity and the galaxy rebuilt slowly, carefully on foundations of mutual respect rather than unrecognized service. It wasn't perfect. Old habits died hard. Misunderstandings still occurred. Conflicts still arose. But when humans spoke, the galaxy listened now. When they offered help, it was received with gratitude, not entitlement. When they set boundaries, those boundaries were respected, and humanity in turn helped the galaxy become better, not by doing everything for them, but by showing them how, teaching them, partnering with them, trusting them to learn and grow. Ambassador Chen retired from diplomatic service at 73, returning to Earth to write and teach. Her memoirs, titled The Ledger We Keep, became required reading in diplomatic academies across the galaxy, a meditation on service, boundaries, and the difference between helping and enabling. Engineer Tanaka led a joint task force, humans and 7 other species, developing sustainable infrastructure for newly spacefaring civilizations. His team won the Galactic Innovation Award 3 years running. He attended the ceremonies, accepted the accolades with grace, and used the prize money to establish more partnership programs. Dr. Soroya founded the Interspecies Medical Institute, training the next generation of healers from every species. Her curriculum included technical skills, yes, but also empathy, patience, the understanding that healing wasn't just about fixing bodies but seeing souls. On Luna, the ledger stood as it always had, names etched in stone. But beside it now stood something new, another wall, equally massive, equally covered with names. These were the helpers, the changed, the people across the galaxy who'd learned humanity's lessons and chosen to carry them forward, Kryn relief workers, then teachers, Fathari engineers who built for people rather than profit, Marin doctors who offered free clinics, Flaxian artists who sought to understand rather than dismiss, 10 billion names of people trying to be better, because humanity had shown them how. At the base of the new wall, an inscription in galactic standard, "You remembered us. Now we remember ourselves, who we could be, who we should be, who you believed we were capable of becoming." The galaxy had learned its lesson. It had learned the cost of taking kindness for granted, of dismissing generosity as weakness, of forgetting that civilization was built on 10 billion small acts of care that went unnoticed until they were gone. Humanity had vanished, and in their absence, the galaxy had finally grown up. Now humanity was back, not as caretakers or saviors, but as partners, as equals, as friends. And the galaxy, grateful and wiser, welcomed them home. In the council chamber, where 17 empty seats had once stood as monuments to failure, those seats were filled again. Human ambassadors, new ones, some of them, but carrying forward the legacy, sat among equals, their voices heard, their contributions valued, their boundaries respected. The galaxy turned on its axis. Stars were born and died, civilizations rose and fell, but through it all a lesson endured, that kindness is not weakness, that service is not servitude, that those who care for others are not naive. They are the strongest among us, for they choose to be strong for more than themselves. That when someone offers you help, you say thank you. That when someone sets a boundary, you respect it. That when someone's absence leaves a void in your life, perhaps you should have noticed their presence while it filled it. The humans had vanished without a word, and the galaxy had faced its guilt. Now they had returned, and the galaxy was determined to be worthy of that return. Not perfect, not immediately, not without struggle, but better. Always trying to be better, because that's what humanity had taught them. And finally, the galaxy was ready to learn.